Run through your 8 principles again that are in your book, and then why are these harder to attain for men rather than women?
It's pretty simple. Trade less, make more. I mean, what we see here from studies are that men tend to trade more than women. One study I cite in the book says that men traded their accounts 45% more than women, and that is just bad for long-term investing. It affects your returns. It runs up your transactions costs. And that flows pretty quickly into our second principle in the book, which is to rein in overconfidence. That's another word that comes up time and again in the investing literature, is overconfidence. Men tend to just be more overconfident when it comes to investing and other things, but in this case, we'll stick to investing. And basically they just think that they know more than they do. The old saw of men don't want to stop and ask for directions. Adds a little something to that, when it comes to investing, whereas women are more likely to say, we don't know everything. We're fine asking questions. That doesn't embarrass us. And what that can do for you as an investor, if you look at a guy like Buffett, he only invests in the things that he understands. And when you understand a company, that means you've done your research, you're less likely to panic and sell when you shouldn't sell, and you're more likely to hold on. The next principle we talk about in the book, shun risk, which is another thing. Men just tend to take more risk than women do. Women, and this holds across kind of different areas of study. This doesn't just hold with finance. Women just tend to be more risk averse. So if you put that with the overconfidence that we just talked about, that can set you up to be, if you're a man, if you're overconfident and taking too much risk, you can do some really dumb things. You can buy things you don't understand, trade too much, trade on hot stock tips, look at investing as kind of a game or a gamble. If you're a woman, you're nervous about investing maybe, but that's a good thing. You will do more research. You will make it more meaningful when you buy a stock. You'll make sure you understand what it is they're doing. You won't just trade just to be trading. You don't look at it as kind of this competitive thing. Our next principle would be another one that sounds kind of counterintuitive, which is focus on the positives of pessimism. Optimism in life, that's a good thing. We all like that. But when it comes to investing, that can make you actually ignore critical information when you're evaluating your investment decisions. If you've already have bought a stock, if you're ignoring all the information about it, you could end up holding on to something that you didn't know that much about going into. Women just tend to be a little more realistic, and so does Buffett. And that also, in a sense, gets back to, if we're talking about pessimism, we talked about 2008, Buffett, that was a very pessimistic time, and he was buying. You have to also have the fortitude as an investor to do that. Our next one would be research extensively, which Buffett is just renowned for the amount of research that he does. He's said to read 5 newspapers a day. He reads tons of annual reports. He's often said that if you were to watch him working, you would be really bored because all you would see is a guy just sitting there reading all day. But that's not to be taken lightly. Now, I'm not saying we can all spend all of our time reading every day, all day like that. But as an investor, it's important to arm yourself with that information and to arm yourself with that knowledge. And that gets back again to the overconfidence, making sure you're only buying companies you truly know and understand. Our next 2, I'll do them kind of together, are ignore peer pressure and learn from mistakes. I know this will sound slightly controversial, but the studies I look at in the book show that men tended to actually suffer more from peer pressure, especially in times of strife, than women did. I mean, basically the presence of other men in the room made them take more risks. It made them do things where even the risk they were taking didn't pay off. It didn't help the situation at all. They still took more risk. Women did not do that. And Buffett also does not care. He's never cared what's going on Wall Street, what other investors are doing. He goes his own way. Look at 2000, the dot-com bubble. Everyone said Buffett's done. He's through. He's not buying into all these stocks. And he was right. He said, this is a bubble. I'm not going to get sucked into it. I'm going to stay my own way. I'm going to buy the companies I understand. And as an investor, being able to kind of ignore that is a really good thing, to not listen to what everyone else is doing. And then also learning from your mistakes is critical. You're going to make mistakes as an investor. We all have. Buffett has too. I have a whole chapter in the book about it. He's not perfect. But you have to be able to be honest with yourself and not be overconfident and look at what went wrong, analyze it, try try to learn from it, see what you did wrong, that you know, so you don't repeat the mistake in the future. And then the final one we talk about in the book, which is kind of fun, is testosterone, basically. It's kind of embracing your feminine influences. So I'm certainly not saying that Buffett is, lacks testosterone. I would never say that. But what he's learned to do, and what I would encourage male investors out there to do, and take from this book, is to really learn to control the emotions, the things that testosterone gets them caught up in, this aggressive, kind of competitive, risk-taking nature. You've got to learn to calm that stuff down, and if you're a woman, naturally you have about 10% of the testosterone a man does. So you're already, a long way there. When it comes to kind of embracing your feminine side. It's just that a lot of women don't seem to realize that naturally they're suited to be great investors.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned how important research is. Outside of the Motley Fool, what are some other tools that women and men can use in their investing research?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would really say, obviously after you've read this book, I would say the letters, Warren Buffett's letters to his shareholders throughout the years, have been unbelievable. You don't have to own a share of Berkshire Hathaway to enjoy those and to learn from them and to read from them. Just go to BerkshireHathaway.com, and he's got them all there, all the way back to the 60s or 70s. Every year he really tries to educate investors on different topics. That's a great resource. There are there's so many great books. The other books on Buffett are really great. I love Lowenstein's book on Buffett is really good. Peter Lynch's 2 books are wonderful. That book, Good to Great, I really like that. On a day-to-day basis, when you are an investor, you have to just kind of read about the companies that you're invested in. I'm not saying follow them moment by moment, follow their stock movements, but it's important to stay up when your company releases a quarterly report, to read it, or the annual report, just to keep yourself informed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then you alluded to this before. I think you tell readers to shun risk. Isn't that more common among men? I almost think it's almost like men invest like they grocery shop. They just kind of run in, they buy whatever they are going to get, and women are checking prices and they're shopping for deals. And you want to talk some about that and how you balance risk with reward?
Yeah, absolutely. In investing, we obviously can't eliminate all risk. There's always risk involved. But as an investor, something that you can do that Buffett does is just do everything you can to limit your risk. Don't take unnecessary risks. Yes, you're going to, if you invest in a very kind of small cap company that's a growth story, you're just inherently taking more risk. But your hope is, you'll get more reward out of that because it is a smaller company, it should be faster growing. But one thing you can do that Buffett really does, which we talk about in the book, is this idea of margin of safety. It takes some kind of math, you got to really get in there and dig in a little bit to determine the intrinsic value of the company that you're thinking about investing in. But you can get some really amazing companies this way. Basically you can look at it as kind of a safety net or a cushion. Buffett did this with Washington Post back in 1974. When he bought it, he had calculated that the company as a whole was worth $400 million. And it was selling at that time as a whole at $100 million. This was an enormous margin of safety, undervalued security. And he was able to buy it at that point. And then his patience kicked in because actually the stock dropped from there. I think it dropped like 20%. And it spent several years trading underneath what he believed the company overall was worth. But because he'd done his homework, he was very cautious. He read everything about it. He calculated all these figures. He knew he was right. He knew he could hold on. And eventually, obviously, Washington Post ended up being a huge investment for Mr. Buffett. He was very well rewarded.